Imagine a can of Red Bull. You see it everywhere. At the local gas station, in the hands of college students pulling all-nighters, and plastered across Formula One race cars going 200 miles per hour. Last year alone, they sold over 12 billion cans worldwide, generating more than $10 billion in revenue. But here is a massive, heavily guarded secret about this corporate empire. Red Bull doesn't make Red Bull. They own 0 factories. They have no manufacturing plants. They don't even manage their own global supply chain. If you look at traditional beverage giants like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, they are obsessed with manufacturing efficiency, bottling plants, and global logistics networks. Red Bull looked at that traditional model and completely walked away. So, if they don't produce the drink, how did a company that physically manufactures nothing become the dominant energy drink empire on the planet? And how did they convince the world to pay $4 for a beverage that costs less than 20 cents to make? Today, we are going to tear down the hidden economics of Red Bull and show you how a struggling Austrian salesman invented a loophole in modern capitalism. To understand the genius of Red Bull's business model, we have to go back to 1982. Dietrich Mateschitz, an Austrian marketing executive, was traveling to Thailand for a business trip. He was exhausted, suffering from severe jet lag. At a local pharmacy in Bangkok, he bought a small uncarbonated syrup drink called Krating Wang. Translated into English, it meant Red Gower or Red Bull. The drink was formulated by a Thai entrepreneur named Chaleo Uvidya. It was packed with caffeine, taurine, and sugar, and it was primarily sold to truck drivers and factory workers to keep them awake during long shifts. Within minutes of drinking it, Mateschitz's jet lag disappeared. He immediately saw an opportunity. He tracked down Chaleo Uvidya and proposed a partnership. They would each invest $500,000, take a 49% stake in the new company, and Mateschitz would bring the drink to Western markets. But there was a huge problem. When Mateschitz brought the formula back to Europe, it was a disaster. Market research firms conducted blind taste tests, and the results were brutal. People hated it. They said it tasted like medicine, it was too sweet, and the texture was weird. Investors laughed him out of the room. Traditional business logic said if the product fails the taste test, you kill the product. But Mateschitz wasn't a product engineer, he was a marketer. He realized that the strange taste wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. It didn't need to taste like a refreshing soda, it needed to taste like it actually worked. Mateschitz carbonated the drink, redesigned the can into a sleek, tall silver and blue bullet, and priced it artificially high. By pricing it significantly higher than a can of Coca-Cola, he created an immediate psychological trigger. In the consumer's mind, if it's expensive, it must be powerful. But he still had no marketing budget to compete with the giants. So he deployed one of the most brilliant guerrilla marketing strategies in history. When Red Bull launched in London, nobody was buying it. So Mateschitz hired teams of college students and gave them a very strange mission. He told them to drive around London at night and physically crush empty Red Bull cans. Then, they were instructed to throw these empty, crushed cans into the trash bins outside of the most popular clubs, bars, and college campuses in the city. When the club-goers walked out at 2 a.m., they saw trash cans overflowing with Red Bull. It created the ultimate illusion of demand. People thought, if everyone else is drinking this, I need to find out what it is. He also paid popular students to host massive parties and supplied them with free Red Bull on the condition that they leave the cans visibly lying around. He wasn't selling a drink, he was selling a lifestyle. And he was doing it entirely through social engineering. But creating hype is one thing, scaling a global empire is another. This is where Red Bull made their most crucial economic decision. The decision to own absolutely nothing. Instead of spending billions building factories to meet the new demand, Red Bull outsourced 100% of its production to an Austrian juice company named Rausch. Rausch mixes the ingredients, Rausch fills the cans, Rausch handles the packaging and ships them to the globe. Red Bull, the company, rarely ever touches a physical can. Let's break down the actual unit economics of this ghost supply chain. The liquid inside a standard can of Red Bull, the water, the taurine, the caffeine, costs roughly 9 cents to produce. The aluminum can itself costs about 10 cents. Total cost of goods sold is around 20 cents per can. Yet, you pay $3 or $4 at the convenience store. That is a staggering profit margin. So where does all that extra money go? Traditional companies spend maybe 10% of their revenue on marketing. Red Bull spends nearly the entire global revenue just on marketing. They realized that if they didn't have to worry about manufacturing, factories, or unions, they could pour all of their resources into the one thing that actually matters: attention. This brings us to the present day and the true identity of the company. Red Bull is not a beverage company. It is a multi-billion-dollar media empire operating in disguise. They built the Red Bull Media House, a massive production studio that creates feature films, documentaries, and magazines. They don't just sponsor athletes, they own the teams. They own 2 entire Formula One racing teams. They own professional soccer clubs in New York, Leipzig, and Salzburg. In 2012, they funded Felix Baumgartner to jump out of a helium balloon from the edge of space, falling to Earth at supersonic speeds. Millions of people watched it live on YouTube. And the entire time, the Red Bull logo was plastered across his suit. They have realized that traditional advertising is dead. Nobody wants to watch a 30-second commercial about an energy drink. But people will watch a man jump from space. They will watch extreme mountain biking. They will watch a Formula One car drift through a city street. Red Bull creates the most extreme, high-adrenaline content in the world, and then they simply monetize that massive audience by selling them a canned beverage. And this is the genius of their economic model. They essentially invented a loophole in modern capitalism. Create the culture, outsource the physical product, and keep all the profit. When you buy a Red Bull, you aren't really paying for a caffeinated beverage. You are paying a premium to fund a global extreme sports syndicate. You are buying a tiny piece of that adrenaline. Red Bull doesn't make drinks. They manufacture energy. They manufacture excitement. They manufacture attention. And they figured out a way to put that attention inside a silver and blue can. The next time you hear that familiar crack of a Red Bull, just remember, you aren't drinking a beverage. You are drinking a media empire.